Isn't it amazing when you and your partner climax at the same time? Well, it's actually not that common. I'm Dr. Rena Malik, urologist and pelvic surgeon, and today we're going to talk about how you can try to climax with your partner at the same time, and also, is it normal to, and is it something that you should desire? Now, oftentimes, this is sort of portrayed as like the pinnacle of sexual experiences on movies and in TV. But in reality, simultaneous orgasms are not that common. Now, before I get into it, what do I mean by having a simultaneous orgasm? Now, this is actually different from what we call blended orgasms, which means that one person experiences orgasms from multiple different erogenous zones at the same time. How often do these actually happen? Well, the truth is, there's actually very little data on this. There's not been a lot of rigorous scientific research looking at how often people or couples are having simultaneous orgasm. However, there was a small survey that was done by a sex toy company and found that about 89% of couples reported having orgasmed at the same time at some point in their lifetime. And 37% of them saying it happens more than half the time that they have sex with their partner. But again, we have to take those numbers with a grain of salt because these are usually people who are getting solicited by a sex toy company and it's not a controlled study. And so probably they're more likely to be empowered and engaged in their sex life in a different way. Now, what we do know is that men and women often have different average times to orgasm during a partnered sexual experience. Studies have shown that women typically take about 14 minutes, somewhere between 10 and 20, to reach orgasm during intercourse, while men on average will take around 5.5 minutes, somewhere between 2 and 10 minutes. If you're an average person, there's a bit of a mismatch in timing. That said, it's certainly possible to have a simultaneous orgasm, and some couples really report enjoying and valuing that experience. However, I want to be clear that it's totally fine and normal if it doesn't happen regularly or if it doesn't happen at all. Now, outside of the difference in timing, right? So if you figure out how long it takes your partner and how long it takes you, and you can sort of figure that out, there's still some other reasons why this is sometimes challenging. First off is that women and men often have different arousal patterns. And so what that means is that they have different sexual response cycles. On average, men tend to orgasm quicker, as I mentioned earlier, and sometimes it requires women a lot longer time to complete arousal. So, for example, arousal is that feeling of being turned on, right? And so men often will get aroused very quickly, whereas women, sometimes it can take up to 25 minutes for women to be fully aroused. And what that entails during that time is that their vagina is lengthening and widening to prepare for penetration. And things are happening, lubrication is occurring to make sure that sex is going to be pleasurable and not uncomfortable, right? And uncomfortable sex is certainly not going to lead to climax. Also, secondly, everyone's a little bit unique, right? So people have unique bodies. And as I've mentioned many times on this channel before, that men will often climax very easily through stimulation of their penis, whether it's through oral, penetrative, intercourse, or even manual. Whereas women don't always orgasm through penetrative intercourse. They need some form of clitoral stimulation. The large majority of them need some form of clitoral stimulation to climax. And so if you're just relying on penetrative sex to have simultaneous orgasms, that's often not going to work. And lastly, emotional and physical state. So you may have heard that oftentimes women need to be in the moment to have sex. Well, actually everyone needs to be in the moment and be able to be present in the moment to have good sex. And things like stress, how relaxed you are, how emotionally connected you feel, can sometimes really affect the ability to climax and the sexual experience. Now, if you really want to have simultaneous climax, there are a few things you and your partner might want to explore. First off, focus on foreplay. This can help get both of the partners aroused sufficiently before penetration, and this can allow both partners to get aroused sufficiently for penetration. So spend time in foreplay. Get yourself to the point where you are both really eager and ready to climax. And this is where the next tip comes in. Pacing is important. So if one partner tends to climax faster, you want to try to slow down so the other partner switch to less intense activities so that both partners can catch up with each other. So that may mean that one partner, whoever takes a little bit longer, needs a bit more attention first to allow them to climax at the same time. And again, I think this is only if it's something you desire. I think as long as sex leads to pleasure and enjoyment and not frustration, that is the goal here. Now, of course, I think climaxing together can be a very pleasurable and enjoyable experience for both parties involved. And so, again, this is why we're having this conversation. Next big thing is communicate. I talk about this all the time. We don't know how to talk about sex, but it is important to start talking about it. Now, in the bedroom is not the greatest time to start talking about sex, but if you want to have this experience, it's important to let your partner know that that's your goal so they can help you in achieving that, right? You need both people on the same page. And also, during sex, nonverbal communication can be really helpful. So actually sitting down when you're with your partner, gently nudging them in a certain direction, or sort of telling them, oh, I like that, or hey, let's slow down, whatever it is, but using your words and your nonverbal cues to tell your partner what you need in order to get to the point where you're close to climax, or to slow down if you're almost there and your partner's not there yet. And some couples even find it helpful to count down together to climax. And that brings us to mutual stimulation. If penetrative sex doesn't work for both of you to reach climax, then it may be useful to try to mutually stimulate either each other or yourselves individually together at the same time so that you can then sort of achieve climax together at the same time, but doesn't have to be during penetration specifically. And lastly, and most importantly, enjoy the journey. Sometimes when you're focusing too hard on achieving climax together, this can create a lot of pressure and stress is a killer of sex. You want to make sure that you're not pressuring your partner or you're not feeling pressure to climax, because that in and of itself can make you start thinking, oh my God, why am I not climaxing? And then you've now no longer in the headspace to have an orgasm. And that brings us to the true final tip, which is practice makes perfect. The more acquainted you get with each other's bodies, with what you like, what stimulation works, the more likely you are to sync up. And so while we don't talk about it enough, practicing sex is what you need to do to have better sex, right? It takes practice. It's a skill that is to be learned. And also, don't forget to use lube. So lube can really enhance sensations for both partners. You can also try practicing edging techniques, so getting yourself close to orgasming and then backing off, which can then help you both try to orgasm with better control. Also consider using toys. So vibrators or cock rings might help sync up arousal levels. Bottom line, there is no single right way to experience sexual pleasure. If you want to have simultaneously orgasms, that can be fun and it can be great. And it's fun to explore, but if it's creating stress or anxiety or making it difficult, please know that the bottom line is to enjoy sex, to communicate, to have pleasure and intimacy with your partner. Thanks so much for watching this. If you guys found this helpful, make sure that you check out my podcast. So it's here on YouTube. You can see the full length and clips of the podcast on this YouTube channel. But if you like to listen to podcasts while you're driving or walking or doing activities, make sure to find my podcast. It's called the Rena Malik MD Podcast. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, whatever podcast platform you use, and subscribe so that you can hear conversations I'm having with experts, solo episodes, Ask Me Anything episodes, and it's really been a wonderful experience for me to start the podcast, and I think you guys will really enjoy it. And as always, we're going to take care of yourself because you're worth it.